Okay, welcome to our editions of the Feed Yard Extension webinar series. Hopefully this information is useful for you when you're accessing it online at our beef website. If you are watching online and you'd like to evaluate the program, which would be very helpful for us, you can see there's a link there to go.unl.edu/feedlot-webinar fall 18. We would welcome your feedback and comments on how we're doing. Today's topic is on BQA and why we need to focus on that. You know, BQA has been around for a long time and has been an emphasis area for the beef industry, but it's being rejuvenated, I would say, and the importance is certainly high right now. So to discuss some things related to BQA and why you should be paying attention to that and be sure that you're certified, our speaker today is Rob Eirich, who's an extension educator and focuses entirely on BQA. He's based in the Panhandle Station, and look forward to your comments, Rob.
Okay, thanks for having me today, and we'll jump right into beef quality assurance. As has been mentioned, beef quality assurance is not a new program. It's always been a voluntary program for us in the beef industry that was started in the mid-'80s by producers and by the people that really have investment into the beef industry, as far as from the cow-calf level to the consumer's dinner plate. And so that partnership is still strong across the country with the National BQA Advisory, as well as NCBA's producer education team also helps in managing some of it at the national level. But we also have a strong partnership here in Nebraska with Nebraska Extension, Nebraska Cattlemen, the Beef Council, as well as the Nebraska Veterinary Medicine Association, who also act as trainers for beef quality assurance as well. And so when we think about this program starting in the 80s, it was really designed to really target some issues that they found were very common within our beef cattle industry, and those were mainly injection site lesions and drug residues. And we've had some great success, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but really the bottom line comes down to basically four big topic areas that BQA really focuses on, and the new promotion, the right way is the only way, is really kind of where we're sitting with BQA now, because we want to produce that high quality, wholesome beef product each and every time. That way, when our consumers have it on their dinner plate, they're very confident they are getting the best quality, but also the safest product that they can get. We want to make sure that we're raising it for that good eating experience as well. Many of us probably have had a experience eating a product, and it's probably one of those experiences that would cause us to maybe take a step back and not consume that product again, or go to that location again. And so really, when we look at that 98% of our consumers not having a connection with production agriculture, they would have that bad eating experience with a product, a beef product in this situation. They probably will stop to purchase. Stop purchasing that product, but they probably go to some of our other competitive proteins out there. And so we want to make sure that we give them a good experience each and every time, and that consistency is there with them. In the 2016 beef quality audit, it was mentioned that even though sometimes the value of our product is a little bit higher, consumers like the taste of that product and they prefer to have that product. And so beef is that product. And so we are very pleased with that, but we need to focus on what we do daily to really ensure the animal care and well-being, make sure we eliminate any risk of causing any food safety or damage or any type of injury to those animals, from nutrition to animal health to handling. The whole piece really plays into what we do daily. And what we do as a baby calf can really affect that calf all the way through its life cycle until we do harvest that animal and put it on the dinner plate. So again, we have to think about that and the food safety side of things. And we as producers, feed yards, cow-calf operators, stockers, this is becoming a major piece of what we do. But even though we've done things very successfully, we still have some room to improve. As I said, we have had some successes. In 2016 was the last National Beef Quality Audit, which is done every 5 years. And there's been some great success stories when we start thinking about this. Fed cattle, we had 95 or 99.5% of the carcasses showed no injection sites outside the neck. That's a big improvement when we think about in the 80s, 20 to 25% of the carcasses, fed carcasses going down the rail, had injection sites in loins and rounds. And so we've made a great improvement there. We've also, from 1991 until 2016, we had 49% of cattle were grading choice or prime in 91. In 16, we had 71% of the cattle were grading choice and prime. We also looked at lameness, making sure cattle are being shipped and taken care of and making sure we're not having issues in transportation with lameness. And we had to, this was the first year they gathered a lot of that information in 16, but again, that's a pretty high benchmark when we say 90, close to 97% of these cattle showed no lameness issues coming off the truck. And that's a bit, those are success stories on the fed cattle side, but also when we look at market cows and bulls, we've also done some great improvements there. We've reduced lameness issues, saying that we're calling cattle earlier, we're getting them before they're too severe, and we're getting them marketed appropriately. So 90 or 87% of beef cattle had no lameness issues, and 76% of the dairy showed no lameness issues at that level. This is something that we've kind of focused on even with handling in those type of scenarios. But again, that success story is there. With those numbers, will we ever get zero in lameness? We do know that's a priority in calling situations. Usually lameness issues are one of the top priorities for calling animals. So again, we're improving and we're marking those cattle earlier on before they get too severe. The other success story I want to mention in cows and bulls is we have reduced injection sites in rounds and loins. We've moved that up to the neck area. Again, some success there, even though this is also an area where we can continually focus on, where we still have 15% of the dairy cattle that are marketed and 7% of beef cows and bulls that are marketed have injection sites outside of that neck region. So, but some good success stories. When we look at some focus areas, as we look at what do we still need to focus on, and I think we're going to spend just a minute here talking about the importance of BQA in these different focused areas. And so one of those areas that we talk about right off the bat is, along with the veterinary fee or veterinary client-patient relationship, is building preventative health plans as well as some strong antibiotic stewardship. To build kind of that program around animal health from the very start of that calf's life. And so when we look at that, that's probably an area where we probably haven't had as strong of a focus, even though many of us have implemented herd health programs as far as vaccination programs, and we do things judiciously. Having a true written program and a plan down of what we're doing is probably the key part here. And so when we look at feed yards and we look at cow, calf, and stocker operations, building that preventative health program is pretty important for our consumer and our food chain, because they want to ensure that we're doing things right. And we're trying to prevent things from happening, but yet they also understand there's going to be some concern with some treatment plans. And so antibiotic stewardship becomes more important than helping build that. And that's part of the BQA, is that judicious use of antibiotics, making sure it's needed, making sure that we're observing things routinely to catch things early on, and also trying to implement, again, those preventative measures that we might eliminate some of those risk factors involved. Another thing that came out of the audit that we continually need to focus on is uniformity and consistency of the end product, whether it be quality, whether it be size, portion sizes, and those type of things. And how do we implement that into our food chain? Because that's what our consumers are asking for to those retailers and wholesalers. And so when you start looking at that, it comes back to us as producers and trying to meet that need and trying to narrow up that variation of product that we have in our industry. And so how can we work together in building this program and working with you to give you the tools that can help in that aspect? And that's truly what BQA is about. Now, other areas that we found in the 16 audit that really came up in a lot of different conversations is, one, bruising. We had 39% of fed cattle that had some bruising on that carcass, in addition to 64 of market cows and 43% of market bulls. But in that fed cattle piece, even though most of these are minimal bruises with less than one trim, we have to think about what portions, what pieces can go into some bruising. And so focusing with BQA on good stockmanship and low stress handling, facilities, transportation, how can we find those areas through doing some BQA programming and some education that we can reduce some of these factors that are involved in bruising? And so again, it's that piece that we keep growing, we keep building on. And then the other thing that came to light in the 2016, and it's probably some that needs some more research and some more focus on, but how do we help you as producers when we start thinking about things like condemnations of livers, those condemned livers? We have 31% in fed cattle, 21% in cows and bulls. Those are all increases from previous audits. And so we have to really kind of focus on what's maybe some of those causes. Can it be some of that nutrition? Can it be health? Can it be the pieces before that? And how we build our quality assurance program to help eliminate some of those concerns or some of those type of condemned livers and abscesses and those type of things. And so really those kind of things are the things that we think are very important for us to think about as an industry, and BQA continually builds those daily practices to help us in that. And so putting a lot of that information together, some other focus areas or some priorities that BQA has set, and probably the things that are the most important for us as producers to go through the certification and really start the development of these priorities in our operation, and we'll go through these. Probably the number one is we need to increase the number of people that implement all the practices, whether it be from injection sites to plans, herd health plans, to great stockmanship, low stress handling, to making sure our facilities are well maintained and work properly, and those type of things probably needs to be our key priority. We need to be all showing that we're doing the things the right way for the right reasons, and set that as a priority, but also making sure we're implementing these programs to ensure our end user that we do care about these animals and we do follow these principles to ensure great food safety and a high quality product that gives them the best eating satisfaction. But along with that, we need to do a better job with BQA as we get certified, as we implement, communicating the importance of this program to our food chain and our consumers. Most of these consumers are asking more about where their food is raised, how it's raised, because they do have that set of priorities that they feel are important. And so when we start communicating BQA principles or beef quality assurance principles, we have to talk about the best handling and care of these animals. We communicate what's important to us and how we want to prevent any health risk, or how we want to ensure that we have top quality nutrition. And so that education piece becomes an important part of the certification as well. We also do a lot of work in the area with education on BQA, of making sure we're transparent in really passing on information and sharing information within all sectors of the industry. And that might become a bigger piece of what our consumers and our food chain is asking for. And so how can we better help you? And we discuss a lot about that, is sharing that information, or how to make sure we ensure that we gather the information that we need. We also, we've already talked about the uptake of making sure we have preventative health strategies and antimicrobial or antibiotic stewardship practices in place. Again, in that area, discussing the importance of that and understanding that stewardship piece, because as we look into the future, the opportunities have a lot of new type of microbials or antibiotics for the food production chain might be a little bit more limited than it ever has been. We probably won't see a lot of new products, so we have to be very diligent in putting these practices into place to ensure that those products that we have had and we still have are very effective, and that efficacy of those products is very high. And so that stewardship becomes a big piece, and there's a lot of things that are involved in that. We also want to stress the importance of everything we do is important to the food safety strategies all the way through the food chain to the very end. We also saw there's some improvements in genetics, and again, it's probably a new area for beef quality assurance, but talking about how we can improve those things, or are there some things that we're finding with some genetics that maybe might be some reduced risk as far as we look at some of our animal health illnesses, or those risk of illness or health in those circumstances. And so are there some tools out there we can gather? And again, the last piece is we've already talked about, is trying to maximize the uniformity in cattle as far as what our end product is for our consumers. So again, these pieces are all kind of high-level priorities for beef quality assurance, but it really comes down to the importance of it, comes down to us doing the right thing, but knowing the right type of principles to include in our operation and those practices, and trying to give you the tools that are out there to help us improve that. And that's the importance of why we believe that it is important to get certified and follow those practices and implementing them. And that's why we really want to strive to increase the numbers of certifications across Nebraska, across the nation, just to get that word out there and get the proper things taken care of. Many of us probably have heard, as we kind of look into a lot of our industry media, or heard on different news channels, or even through the food chain itself, that there's starting to be a BQA requirement implemented by our packers. And so I just wanted to kind of step through this a little bit as far as some time frames. Probably the one that probably started to drive the requirements probably the quickest was Wendy's came out in support of BQA and the principles that beef quality assurance really represents, and being the one that says, these are the type of principles, these are the science-based practices that we believe are important to ensure our food safety, but what our consumers really are asking for. And so they said that by 2019, they will source all of their beef product from cattle feeders who are BQA certified. And so that kind of triggered the next dominoes to say to kind of come into place here, because then Tyson and Cargill both came out and they have implemented a BQA requirement of their suppliers. And so Tyson says they will source 100% of their beef from BQA certified feed yards by January 1st of 2019, and Cargill has said 90% of their product will be sourced from BQA certified feed yards by January 1st of 19. When we look at kind of the remainder of it, National again has came on board, and they have required some of it in their certain products currently and before, but they have also said that they will, all their direct market supply, beef supply will come from certified yards by January 1st of this year, of 2019. And then U.S. Premium, the first day of 2019, their first delivery day, they will start to also be requiring that all feed yards have a BQA certification on board for all their suppliers as well. One that you probably will recognize that isn't on there currently is JBS. JBS has been working on kind of their driving factor and kind of a date and timeline, but we believe JBS will be announcing sometime early in 2019 a requirement for BQA as well in their beef suppliers. And so again, that is coming through what our discussion was with a lot of those, a lot of their food chain folks with JBS. Now, the other piece that we're also going to talk about here in a minute is transportation, beef quality assurance transportation. This is for all drivers that haul cattle, specifically going into the major processing plants, which when I mention major, it'll be Cargill, Tyson, National, and JBS have all came forth and said by January 1st of 2020, all of their drivers coming in will be required to have completed a BQA transportation training as well and have a certification card with them as they haul cattle into those facilities. So again, that's a all new program on the transportation side that we will talk about here shortly. So just some highlights of what the principles are in the programs, in the BQA program for cow-calf stockers and feed yards. Really it comes down to a working relationship with a veterinarian, building your herd health protocols, developing those protocols also in antibiotic stewardship in that treatment plan, understand judicious use. We do a lot with proper diagnosis and following that diagnosis with treating that animal with the proper antibiotic or antimicrobial that's labeled for those treatments. And so again, that's all part of the stewardship piece. We also get a lot into stockmanship and the proper care and well-being, understanding space and understanding quality nutrition and water supply and keeping things clean, but yet also in that whole piece is making sure we have adequate protection or mitigation for some of our extreme weather conditions and events that we have throughout the year. And so we talk a lot about those. And then again, we've always talked about the key component of good stockmanship, low stress handling, understanding the flight zone, working with those animals' vision as far as those differences they have compared to us and how it affects them in that handling process. We also, in the basic BQA piece, we do talk about transportation as far as proper load size and space on trucks and in transit, but probably not as in depth as I'll mention here in a little bit with transportation. But the last piece, actually two pieces that I talk about also is one, proper euthanasia protocols. And then the last piece, which is not on this slide, but we do discuss a lot of biosecurity and making sure that we eliminate any risk of spreading disease throughout the industry or bringing disease into our operation, and how we can really work on different aspects of finding those key biosecurity risk points and hazard points and really start to focus on how we can implement all these principles to ensure that proper care, well-being, and health of those animals. Now, there is a number of different ways that we can do the certification. And individually here in Nebraska, we can do face-to-face or in-person trainings. Those trainings are usually published by dates on the BQA website, but also, you can find those in media or by talking to potentially your local extension educator or contacting me at Nebraska Beef Quality Assurance. The other piece that we can do in person or face-to-face trainings is majority of our cattle veterinarians here in Nebraska that do work within the cattle industry are BQA trainers and can help you get that certification. It might be shoot side, it might be having one-on-one discussions with them, but all of us work together in trying to help you get in-person certifications. There is certification fees involved with the in-person, but you can also go online and do online BQA training. There's three different opportunities as far as it can be a cow-calf, stocker, and then there's a feed yard segment as well. But all those can be done online. That's a free online training, and you can actually follow the link bqa.org, and you can get to that site, and you will have those links available to you there. So the new piece is this was actually just introduced in the newest information and modules and curriculum was released of January of this year of 2018. It's a completely new set of materials that focuses on strictly on working with transportation, dealing with some of those pieces. As we saw, bruising went up. Could that be in some transportation situations? So the principles of good stockmanship are discussed. Go through a lot of biosecurity. Cattle transportation trailers, trucks move a lot of cattle across the country, and biosecurity is a big piece of what needs to be focused on by a driver or a handler in transportation, because of that circumstance of moving cattle great distances and possibly moving different diseases or increasing the risk of spreading those type of disease. The other piece is talking about fitness and transport. What type of cattle should be safe to transport? Which of those cattle might have some minor lameness issues that we might want to take a little bit more care with? Where do we position them in the load? How do we take care of those? Or is there an animal that we see that might not be a good candidate to withstand that rigor of transportation? And so how do we handle those pieces? And that all comes into that idea of fitness for transportation or fitness for transport. Even though most of these drivers understand pre-trip assessments of their vehicles and those walkarounds, we talk a lot more about what are some of the other things that they should be aware of, like weather, making sure everybody is awake and making sure that they're rested for those trips, or what's the distances, what are the routes we need to look at, especially in extreme weather as far as winter extremes and summer extremes and heat, making sure they understand those pieces, but also making sure their trailers and trucks are in good maintenance, making sure there's no risk of injury or any type of situation, even in transit. And that all comes down to that pre-trip, on the road, arrival, loading, unloading pieces. But also the key thing is how can we reduce the risk of any type of injury or emergency situation arising in transit, and how do we manage those things? And so a lot of it might be some common things, but also just having that discussion on how valuable transportation is to our industry. Again, currently we are looking at potentially doing some in-person trainings across the state. Cargill has stepped up and is helping defer some of the cost of some of those in-person trainings, and they are partnering with us on doing some of those, but we're going to also look at doing other in-person trainings across the state, willing to work with different groups if they can get a number of drivers together that are interested in completing it to do in-person. But then also there is an online training as well that they can get the certification online. There's 6 to 7 modules they have to complete. Those links can be found either at bqa.unl.edu/transportation or by going to bqa.org as well. Both of those locations have those pieces there. Again, transportation is going to be 2020. January 1st is when those drivers, and most of the major packers are encouraging that now, and trying to get as many drivers to complete that as possible as we go through the next year. Probably the next step that we continually hear about, and some tools that are available to you, to especially feed yards, to really focus on making sure they're implementing the right practices, and what these packers are going to start asking for, and actually with a couple of them you are subject to a third-party audit currently if you are a beef cattle supplier to them. And so there's some tools out there, and one of those tools is the feed yard assessment, BQA assessment, which has been revised and will continually be revised. But that assessment can be found online at the national site as well as the Nebraska BQA site. And so it really discusses those elements. And this is kind of the next step to operations, kind of making sure that they're implementing the right things, or making sure they understand where their benchmarks are, or where they can improve, or what they are doing right. And so it really focused around making sure we have good written protocols. But the key here is we are working with those because we do have a set of protocols, those templates that are already available to you to really modify for your operation. And those can be found at the bqa.unl.edu website by going to the BQA assessment link. And it talks a lot about those protocols and how we can help you. But then as you go down through the list, it just ensures the assessments that you are doing your training with your employees, you're keeping your records properly. There's also observation to make sure pens are well maintained, making sure pen space is adequate, clean bunks, fresh water supply. Those things are all involved in the facilities. And then actual handling and processing, chute operation, observing handling of those animals to ensure those practices are linked in and implemented properly, or where you might need to do some more training or implement maybe some new principles or practices. So that's kind of the next step, and we continually are willing to help you step through that next step. For assessments, there is a national list that we can get you on after you complete an assessment. We can get your name and your city, state on that list, so you've actually completed it, and you are working on making sure you're establishing and implementing the beef quality assurance principles all the way through. So with that, we went through a lot of information with BQA, but the key is BQA is kind of the gold standard of ensuring our consumers that we as producers in the production chain are doing the right things for the best care, welfare of the animal, but also we take food safety as a top priority and understand everything we do on a daily basis really can affect that end quality as far as that food safety piece for our consumers, and making sure it's a wholesome, safe product. So again, I put my contact information up. Feel free to contact me with any questions. And if there's any other needs that you have, we can work with you on getting those taken care of as well. With that, I will also be available for some questions.
Okay, thanks, Rob. You know, I guess to re-emphasize this difference between, at least from a feed yard's perspective, this is directly coming back to them from the market, so to speak. What if you're a cow-calf producer?
So as the feed yards are getting the requirements from packers, they also have to ensure that they're bringing in the type of cattle that really meet these same principles. And we are starting to see some feed yards that are really looking at making sure that they are getting those type of calves that come off of operations that have those protocols or those principles in place. And the way they can really ensure that is through BQA certification as well. And so currently, the drive is on the feed yards, but this will continually work down through all segments of our industry. And I think the importance for a cow-calf person is down the road, it's just going to open up more marketing avenues for you if you've implemented these programs to ensure this piece and really ensure our food chain that we are doing the right things and we're following these principles from that calf being born until we get to their dinner plate.
Then again, just to reemphasize another point, can you compare and contrast BQA certification and feed yard assessments?
Okay. So BQA certification, that is the training where you get certified that you understand all of the principles, the tools that we want you to implement. And so those would be that face-to-face sit-down training, or it might be a shoot side training as well, but making sure that everybody understands injection sites, making sure everybody understands proper diagnosis, and making sure that they know the importance of those as it's related to the industry. Feed yard assessment is probably the next step that helps us to look at our practices. The assessment can be kind of a self-assessment, or we encourage people, different feed yards, to walk through it with consulting veterinarian or maybe an extension educator or myself, or we're working on trying to get more people involved with helping you walk through that. But that goes through and really looks if you've started to implement those practices. So we encourage you to write SOPs and have a herd health plan. Did you really do it? Do you have the documentation that you have those up? Do you have those SOPs for all your employees to follow? Are you implementing good stockmanship principles when you're handling cattle through the facilities, as far as, you know, limited use of a driving aid, making sure we're properly handling cattle properly through the processing facility, make sure these cattle have good footing to reduce any risk of injury, and then again the observation of pen maintenance and those key principles. So the assessment gives an operation benchmarks where they can work on improvement, but it's an actual observation where they actually look at what they're implementing, where the certification is the training of the principles to implement. I hopefully that kind of explained the difference between the two.
Okay, very good. As Rob alluded to, if you have specific questions related to BQA, feel free to reach out to him. As always, if you have questions related to our general programming or webinar ideas, feel free to reach out to me, and my contact information is there. As I mentioned, you're watching this online. We'd strongly encourage you to evaluate us and offer us feedback and input on topics and what you think of what you've seen. You can go to that URL address there, go.unl.edu feedlot-webinar fall 18. With that, thanks, Rob, and we'll have additional webinars posted and every month here on the last Wednesday of the month. Thanks.